World War II produced some of the most brutal, consequential, and breathtaking armor engagements in the history of human conflict. These weren't just battles between machines, they were collisions of strategy, desperation, willpower, and industrial power on a scale the world had never seen before and has never seen since. From the frozen forests of Belgium to the burning sands of North Africa, from the endless steppes of Russia to the forgotten plains of western Ukraine, tank commanders made split-second decisions that changed the course of entire campaigns, and in some cases, the course of the war itself. In this video, we're going to walk through 4 of the most epic tank battles of the Second World War. Not just the famous ones, but the ones that genuinely changed what was possible. The ones that still echo through military history today. 1. The Battle of the Bulge, Shock in the Snow, the Panzer counterattack in the Ardennes. The date was December 16, 1944. The Allies had been pushing steadily eastward, and many senior commanders, including some who should have known better, believed the war in Europe would be over by Christmas. The front lines in the Ardennes region of Belgium and Luxembourg were thinly held, considered a quiet sector, a place to rotate tired divisions and give green troops their first taste of the front without too much risk. That assumption would prove catastrophic. In the pre-dawn darkness, over 2,000 German artillery pieces opened fire simultaneously along an 80-mile stretch of front. The ground shook. Trees exploded into splinters. And then, out of the fog and the frozen forest, came the tanks, hundreds of them, spearheading 3 German armies in what would become Hitler's last great offensive gamble in the West. The Battle of the Bulge had begun, and nothing about the next 6 weeks would be quiet. At the tip of the German advance, SS Panzer divisions pushed forward with terrifying speed. The most feared of these was Kampfgruppe, a battle group built around Joachim Paper's 1st SS Panzer Regiment, equipped with heavy Tiger II tanks and supported by armored half-tracks carrying hardened Waffen-SS infantry. Paper's orders were brutal in their simplicity: drive fast, ignore your flanks, don't stop for anything. In the first 2 days, his column carved through American lines like a blade through paper, capturing fuel depots, overwhelming isolated units, and generating a kind of panic that spread far faster than any tank could travel. The psychological impact of that advance was almost as devastating as the physical destruction it caused. But the terrain of the Ardennes, that dense, hilly, frozen landscape that the Germans had counted on to mask their approach, now began to work against them. The roads were narrow, often reduced to single lanes through the forest. King Tigers, weighing nearly 70 tons, cracked bridges and became obstacles when they broke down or were knocked out, blocking the very routes the rest of the column depended on. American engineers blew crossings ahead of the advance. Fuel, always the critical variable in armored warfare, began running out faster than the Germans had planned. And American resistance, initially shattered, began to stiffen in ways the German high command hadn't anticipated. At Bastogne, surrounded on all sides, the 101st Airborne held. At St. Vith, outnumbered American armor bought critical days with blood and nerve. Then the weather broke. On December 23rd, clear skies opened over the Ardennes for the first time in weeks, and Allied air power returned in overwhelming force. Supply lines that had already been stretched to breaking snapped entirely. Patton's Third Army, executing one of the most remarkable operational pivots in military history, drove north to relieve Bastogne. The German advance stalled, then reversed. The panzer divisions that had punched so deep into Allied lines now found themselves fighting their way back through the same frozen forests, but this time, with less fuel, fewer tanks, and no hope of reinforcement. The Ardennes offensive had consumed Germany's last strategic reserve in the West. The counterattack in the snow had failed, and with it, any realistic chance of forcing a negotiated peace on the Western Front. 2. The Battle of Kursk, Prokhorovka and the Clash of Titans. If the Ardennes represented Germany's last desperate gamble in the West, Then what happened in the summer of 1943 on the Eastern Front represented something even more consequential, the moment the entire strategic balance of the war shifted, permanently and irreversibly, against the Third Reich. And at the center of that shift was a single day, on a single field, near a small Soviet rail town called Prokhorovka. Operation Citadel, launched on July 5, 1943, was Hitler's attempt to pinch off a massive Soviet salient around the city of Kursk, a bulge in the front line nearly 150 miles wide and 100 miles deep. The plan called for two powerful German army groups to attack simultaneously from the north and south, meet in the middle, encircle hundreds of thousands of Soviet troops, and restore German offensive momentum on the Eastern Front. It was a sound concept on paper, but the Soviets had known it was coming for months. Through one of the most extraordinary intelligence operations of the war, they had received detailed information about German intentions, timing, and axis of advance. Rather than withdraw or preemptively attack, Soviet commander Georgy Zhukov made a bold and ultimately decisive choice. He would let the Germans come, bleed them dry against prepared defenses, and then counterattack with everything he had. What the Germans ran into was unlike anything they had encountered before. The Soviets had constructed 8 successive defensive belts, each one deeper and more heavily fortified than the last, stretching nearly 200 miles into the rear. There were over 1 million mines buried across the approaches. Anti-tank guns were dug in at carefully calculated angles, positioned to engage German armor at its most vulnerable points. The German advance in the north stalled almost immediately. In the south, the elite SS Panzer Corps made more progress, driving deeper into the Soviet defensive system, but at a cost that grew heavier with every mile. And then, on July 12, near Prokhorovka, the two sides collided head-on in what became the largest tank engagement of the entire war. Roughly 600 Soviet tanks from the 5th Guards Tank Army charged directly into the advancing SS Panzer divisions, which fielded approximately 400 armored vehicles including some of Germany's most powerful machines, Panthers, Tigers, and the massive Ferdinand tank destroyers. The Soviets made a calculated tactical decision to close the distance as fast as possible, neutralizing the range advantage of the heavier German guns by turning the battle into a brutal close-quarters melee. Tanks fired at each other from distances of less than 100 yards. Some rammed each other. The smoke was so thick that commanders lost all situational awareness within minutes. By the end of the day, hundreds of wrecked vehicles from both sides littered the wheat fields around Prokhorovka, burning through the night like torches across a flat and featureless plain. Neither side achieved a clean victory at Prokhorovka. Soviet losses were in fact heavier in terms of tanks destroyed that day. But the strategic outcome was never in doubt. Germany had failed to break through. Operation Citadel was called off days later. And almost immediately, the Soviets launched their own massive counteroffensives, Operations Kutuzov and Rumiantsev, that tore gaping holes in the German lines and began a Soviet advance that would not stop until the Red Army stood in the ruins of Berlin. Kursk was the last time Germany held the strategic initiative on the Eastern Front. After Prokhorovka, the question was no longer whether the Soviet Union would win, it was only a matter of how long it would take. If this kind of deep dive into history is what you come here for, this is the right channel for you. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. There's a lot more coming, and you won't want to miss it. 3. The Battle of El Alamein, Hell in the Desert and the War of Maneuver in North Africa. The Eastern Front was a war of ideology and annihilation, fought with a ferocity that defied conventional military logic. But in North Africa, the war took on a different character entirely. The desert imposed its own rules, brutal, indifferent, and strangely equalizing. There were no civilians to worry about, no cities to protect, no forests to hide in. There was only sand, heat, distance, and the grinding competition between two commanders who had come to respect each other in the way that only men trying to kill each other can. By the summer of 1942, General Erwin Rommel and his Afrika Korps had pushed the British Eighth Army all the way back to a small railway stop on the Egyptian coast called El Alamein. The situation for the Allies was genuinely desperate. Cairo was less than 70 miles away. The Suez Canal, the lifeline of the British Empire, was within reach of German artillery. In London and Washington, contingency plans were being drawn up for the loss of Egypt. Rommel, already legendary across both sides of the conflict, seemed unstoppable. His ability to read the desert battlefield, to strike where least expected, to keep his armored formations moving when his opponents were still issuing orders, it had made him something close to mythological. But myths, like tanks, run out of fuel. What followed at El Alamein was not one battle but two, and between them, a critical turning point that is often overlooked. The First Battle of El Alamein in July 1942 stopped Rommel's advance but failed to destroy his forces. It was the second battle, beginning on October 23, that delivered the decisive blow. By then, a new British commander had taken charge of the Eighth Army. Bernard Montgomery was meticulous, methodical, and utterly unlike the fluid, improvisational style that had defined desert warfare up to that point. He refused to attack until he had overwhelming superiority in men, tanks, artillery, and supplies. When he finally moved, he did so with a weight of material that Rommel, chronically short of fuel, ammunition, and reinforcements, simply could not match. The battle opened with one of the most intense artillery barrages of the entire North African campaign, nearly 900 guns firing simultaneously along a narrow front. British armor and infantry pushed through minefields that stretched for miles, fighting through the night in conditions of dust and darkness that reduced visibility to almost nothing. German and Italian anti-tank screens fought back with professional tenacity, and for several days the outcome remained genuinely uncertain. Rommel, who had been in Germany for medical treatment when the attack began, rushed back to take command. But there was little even he could do. The arithmetic had turned against him. Every tank he lost could not be replaced. Every mile the British advanced brought them closer to his already threadbare supply lines. By early November, the Afrika Korps was in full retreat, a retreat that would carry it all the way across Libya and into Tunisia, where, combined with the Allied landings in Operation Torch, it would eventually be cornered and destroyed entirely. El Alamein was the end of Rommel's dream of reaching the Nile. It was also the moment Winston Churchill famously observed that while this was not the end, and perhaps not even the beginning of the end, it was, perhaps, the end of the beginning. The Desert War had consumed 2 years, enormous resources, and tens of thousands of lives. And it had proven something that would matter deeply in the campaigns to come, that German armor, however skilled, could be beaten when met with sufficient preparation, sufficient supply, and a commander willing to be patient. For the Battle of Brody, the forgotten and massive armored duel of 1941. There is a battle that most people in the West have never heard of. It doesn't appear in many textbooks. It rarely comes up in documentaries. And yet, by almost any measure of scale, it dwarfs nearly every armored engagement that came before or after it, including Prokhorovka. It happened in the opening weeks of Operation Barbarossa, in the summer of 1941, in a region of western Ukraine that was then part of the Soviet Union. It is known as the Battle of Brody, and the numbers alone are staggering. In late June of 1941, as German Army Group South pushed eastward into Soviet territory, it ran headlong into the largest concentration of Soviet armor on the entire front. The Red Army's mechanized corps in the region fielded somewhere between 2,500 and 3,500 tanks, a force that, on paper, should have been more than capable of stopping the German advance cold. Soviet commanders, reacting to the German breakthrough, launched a massive armored counterattack involving 5 mechanized corps across a broad front near the towns of Brody, Dubno, and Lutsk. What followed was 6 days of continuous armored combat across hundreds of square miles of Ukrainian countryside, chaotic, costly, and largely invisible to the outside world. The Soviet tanks that rolled into that battle were not, for the most part, the crude and obsolete machines that German propaganda later described. Among them were significant numbers of T-34s and KV-1s, tanks that genuinely shocked German crews when they first encountered them. The KV-1, in particular, was nearly impervious to the standard German anti-tank weapons of the time. There are documented accounts of single KV-1 tanks absorbing dozens of hits and continuing to fight, holding up entire German columns for hours. And yet, despite this technological advantage in certain areas, the Soviet counterattack collapsed. The reasons why tell us something important not just about this battle, but about the entire catastrophic opening phase of the war on the Eastern Front. Soviet armor in 1941 suffered from crippling systemic failures that no amount of individual tank quality could overcome. Radio equipment was scarce. Many tank crews communicated by flag signals, which were nearly useless in the chaos of a moving battle. Maintenance was poor, and mechanical breakdowns claimed as many vehicles as enemy fire. Fuel and ammunition resupply broke down almost immediately once units moved beyond their starting positions. And critically, coordination between the 5 mechanized corps involved was almost non-existent, each attacked piecemeal, at different times and from different directions, allowing the Germans to concentrate against each thrust in turn rather than facing them simultaneously. The Luftwaffe, enjoying total air superiority, hunted Soviet armor columns on the open roads with near impunity. By the end of the first week of July, the Soviet counterattack had been shattered. The mechanized corps that had entered the battle with thousands of tanks emerged with hundreds, or in some cases, dozens. The Germans had suffered significant losses of their own, and the battle had delayed Army Group South's advance by several critical days. But the strategic outcome was a catastrophic Soviet defeat. The road to Kiev lay open. What the Battle of Brody reveals, more than anything else, is the vast and tragic gap that existed in 1941 between Soviet industrial capacity and Soviet operational capability, a gap that would cost the Red Army millions of lives before it was finally closed. This was not a battle of inferior equipment against superior equipment. It was a battle of a broken system against a functioning one. And in armored warfare, that difference is everything. And if you want to keep going, there's another fascinating story from World War II waiting for you on screen right now. Don't miss it.